Meanwhile, the African Union's Peace and Security Council has held an open session on the links between climate change and conflict. The body believes far more attention needs to be given to the issue. People across Africa are already battling the effects of climate change on livelihoods, food security and water availability. According to a new World Bank report, climate change across East Africa could see more than 10 million people displaced by 2050.
Many countries in Africa have been affected and others are vulnerable to the impacts of climate change and its negative effects on stability and security. The Peace and Security Council needs to dedicate more time to discuss non-traditional causes of conflicts, such as climate change. That's why we agreed to include this item on the agenda of the Peace and Security Council for this month to again debate this subject in order to come up with measures which will help to mitigate the risks it poses.
When we look at the climate change and the conflict link, the first thing which comes in my mind is the fact that the Paris Agreement did not register really enough commitment by member states. And actually, even more worrying is that the implementation of those commitments are not real. For me, this is a global threat to security. The second thing, Madam Chairperson, is that all have been said about the impact of climate change on livelihood, stability, and resilience. And unfortunately, this is more about the poor people in the poorest countries.
Well, to discuss this further, John Chioli joins me in the studio now. He is the Executive Director and CEO of Green Africa Foundation. Thank you very much for coming in, John.
You're welcome.
What is the connection between climate change and conflict in Africa, in your opinion?
Great. You'd know that agriculture has been researched as one of the main drivers of economy in Africa. In fact, in the recent Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change document, you will notice that it has been captured as one of the major economies that has been hindered by climate change. Increase of 1 degree, 2 degrees temperature means that it collapses the whole economy of agriculture in sub-Saharan Africa. Number two, tourism sector is affected because we depend on nature-based tourism in Africa. So we bring people and they bring money because of that. When it collapses, it means a lot of people do not have their livelihoods. The third thing is issue of energy. We derive most of our energy from hydroelectricity. When this collapses, so many industries collapse. So there has been a lot of issues that are connected to that. If you look at issues of grazing, people are grazing their livestock and people are doing agriculture. Right now, there is a lot of flooding across Africa. In 2009, in 2013, there was a lot of, there was a lot of lack of precipitation. That meant that these people were grazing their livestock, were now going to the agricultural lands, and there was conflict. In Kenya, in Laikipia, in Tana River Delta, this has been seen. And across Africa, if you look at South Africa, all this is very common in terms of the conflict over the natural resources. The resources are diminishing. The water level is going down. That means that there will be conflict because all these people are fighting over resources which have been diminished because of climate change.
So people are competing over
Yes.
the scarcity of resources,
Absolutely.
as you say. Is there a way that the population can be made aware of how to use what is available, the available resources, to avoid any possible conflict?
One is policy. We need to implement the policy. Africa is rich in policies. African governments are rich in policies. We need to improve on the policies which are there to guard issues of climate change. We need to adopt climate change smart agriculture in terms of now looking at not relying on rain-fed agriculture so that this can upscale the food availability. Number three, we need to improve on our governance because we need to look at what resources we have are they governed well? Because governance and climate change are also related. If we improve on this, then there's likelihood of managing or adapting to climate change.
Okay, so you're saying the government needs to put proper policies in place. Let's talk about conflict in Africa. We've got countries like South Sudan, Nigeria and the DRC. What can Africans themselves, let's say people on the ground, not just governments, what can they do to stop this sort of thing?
Climate change is not a story. Climate change is real. Climate change starts from you. Climate change is no longer going to, we cannot keep on crying that because of the northern countries have affected us. We have a responsibility. We need to take action. We need to know that this is our countries, and we need to turn things like move the low carbon pathway. We need to use less fossil oils. We need to use energy from renewable sources, and this will reduce the pressure on the trees, pressure on the industry of biomass, because this is another area that has caused climate change because of what we are doing. We have historical injustice in terms of climate change, who has caused it. But we cannot sit there and say we are not responsible, so we are going to crash. We need to improve on our governance. We need to improve on the climate change finances that we have. How are we going to manage them? Northern countries also need to help us because we are vulnerable because of our economy. Our economy is lower than them. Our economy is very fragile because of the situation where we are and even where we are in the map. So we need concerted efforts.
So not just in Africa, but
yes,
globally.
Yes, we need concerted efforts from the supporters, donors. We need concerted effort from our governments, and we need action from ourselves so that we can tackle issues of climate change.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your analysis. John Keoli there, thank you. Executive Director and CEO of Green Africa Foundation.